Welcome to the Jeremiah Show. So I've got a question for you. Do you like listening to this show? Have you enjoyed the guests that we've had on this show? I think you do, because you keep coming back, and I thank you so much for that. Do you enjoy, like I do, taking a peek behind the curtain in the entertainment business, in the music business, exploring pop culture, food gods? Well, we owe a big thank you to my special guest today. His name is Jonathan Platt. Jonathan is the general manager at ALIST Media Entertainment Inc. and the Yoshiki Foundation of America. He is a label general manager, a soundtrack producer, music supervisor. He's in film acquisitions, produced documentaries. He's a film producer, TV producer, music consultant. Jonathan is busy. Jonathan is very successful, and he's directly responsible for many of the fascinating guests that we have talked to over the years. Jonathan has helped us grow this show, not only on podcast platforms like Pantheon, which is a new one, and I wanted to shout out to Pantheon Podcast. Jonathan introduced me to the good folks over there, but also on the radio, different radio stations. Also, would like to say thank you to Radio Candy Media, to Mark Platt. As you know, we're on 6 of Mark's stations around the world. And all of this is a family and friends and great introductions. And so it's been a long time coming, but we've got Jonathan Platt on the show. You're going to be blown away by his career, his outlook on life, and his general love for music and entertainment and people. Jonathan's constantly introducing me to A-listers, and he invites me to these high-profile Hollywood parties, many of which I've chronicled here, as you guys know, in the show. And he tells everyone at these parties that I'm a great radio host. He says, you should be on his show. That's how he introduces me. And I feel so honored and proud when he does. Jonathan does this selflessly. He's never asked for anything. He's never looking for anything in return. He enjoys genuinely the success of others and helping others. And that's the best type of human being, in my opinion. And if it sounds like I hold a great deal of respect for Jonathan, it's because I do. He's a bit of a mythical figure to me. This is true. He's like part man, part executive superhuman being. I just, when you see people succeed and also be kind, I'm in awe of how do you do all that? How do you juggle all that? He's got endless energy and a real passion for people and making connections between them. He's incredibly busy, but he always finds the time to pick up my call. He loves food and good wine as much as I do. And subsequently, we have shared quite a few great meals together and many more to come because we've started a monthly restaurant club. I don't know if I'm giving too much away here, Jonathan, but I'm looking forward to that next meeting at some undisclosed restaurant that we've pinpointed that we want to check out. Jonathan Platt, as some people say, are good people. And there's a lot to learn from a man like Jonathan, not only professionally, but as a personal lifestyle. So in this 2-part series, I'm treating you to a master storyteller, an incredible career. If you've ever wanted to be in the entertainment business or music business, this is the show for you. You're going to get some great stories, some inside tips, and maybe come up with a few ideas of your own of how you break in. We're going to learn some secrets from Jonathan's incredible success over the years. So it's my extreme pleasure and honor to welcome Jonathan Platt to the show. Welcome, Jonathan.
Wow, what an opening.
I want to clap or something for you.
You can proceed over my funeral at any time.
Well, let's hope that doesn't happen anytime soon. But But when it does, we'll celebrate you, my friend.
Thank you.
Um, so you told me once, and it stuck with me, that you live by a certain rule. I know it's a private thing, but do you mind sharing what that rule is that you
I would
live by,
love to.
Jonathan?
But would you indulge me before that to just mention how proud I am of your show? You know,
Uh,
first time I met you and it was you and Big Lou, and you guys were doing sports and I think it was rugby or one of those kind of sports things. And the fact that how you've grown your show over the last few years and your network and all the amazing people that you have on your show, on your network, whether it's Mike Gormley, who's an amazing music executive in his own right, or Kimi Kato as well, who I've known forever, who's
mhm.
also has an amazing show promoting Japanese artists here in the US. I think, I'm really, really proud of what you have accomplished. And so I'm really happy that finally I'm able to be on your show.
Jonathan, it's a long overdue, but you are the puppet master behind the scenes on a lot of that. So the hat goes off to you. We'll just
Not at all.
congratulate each other back and forth all
No,
day.
not at all.
'Cause
But I just want to let you know before we start how excited I am to be on your show.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'm so happy to have you here. And like I said right before we started, it's hard to get, Jonathan gives you his time, but he is so busy. Like to get an hour, get a two-part series with you. I'm feeling pretty lucky. I get you one-on-one for a bit.
Absolutely. So let's talk about philosophy, or I should say how I kind of started. Yeah, there is a rule for me. I think that rule is if you believe in something enough and you incorporate it into your life, it'll happen. I'm a big, big believer in manifest destiny. It started when I actually was in college. I started reading Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, who was given to me by my dad, who was given to him by his grandfather, who both taught that course when they were younger. And I read this book. I was reluctantly to read it. And then I read it, and then I started reading through it, and I realized, wow, this really is about manifesting. And then after that, I read another book called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, also talking about manifesting. And so I kind of try to live my life that way. I realize there's nothing impossible, nothing that you can't do until you put your mind to it. Always make a 5-year plan or make up an overall plan. That's what I did. I did it early. I wanted, in my head, I wanted to work in the record industry. And so I started making a plan on what I wanted to do. And early in my career, I made 5 points that I really wanted to get, 5 different areas in the entertainment industry I wanted to be in. One was records, music, and working a record label. Then was working in soundtracks, music supervising, then doing film acquisitions, and then producing films, and then working in sports. Those were on my bucket list. I really feel like everybody should have a bucket list. That means that there's always something you try to attain to. So I created a bucket list early in my life, and then I just tried to tick those boxes throughout my whole, journey over the last 40 years.
It's interesting you mentioned Dale Carnegie because I almost quoted him without knowing that about you. I almost pulled down my Dale Carnegie off the bookshelf because I thought about you when I was writing the intro and how you work. I watch you work the room at parties. You don't know I'm watching you, but I see what you do, and you really work the room. And there's that great first chapter in that Dale Carnegie book about how you may be nervous walking into a party, but just go and talk to the person about themselves and ask questions about
Attentive
themselves
listening.
and listening. Yeah, and
All about attentive listening, right? Yep,
and I love
absolutely.
the last part of that where they'll go home and they'll go, Jonathan Platt was the most interesting guy I've ever at the party that I talked to, and they never really said, they never asked you anything about yourselves, but you had listened and you had actively listened and pulled stuff from them, and they'll go home and
It's
say,
funny,
that was the best conversation I've ever had.
that is something I always like to tell my kids. I have two sons. One is 23 and the other's 21, and both are now, one started his career. And the first thing I said when he started interviewing for jobs is, the best way to interview for a job is to be a good listener. Ask them questions first and then answer your own. So yeah,
It's so true.
all good.
So this is a really hard business, and you're young, 16, 17, 15, you're thinking, I want to be in the music business, I want sports. You came up with this bucket list and this manifestation that you actually did manifest, as the listener will find out as we go through the show. But this is a hard business. So can you put yourself back, an extremely hard business and hard to break into because you don't really know what you don't know, and you don't know who to meet and who and how you break in and how do I get there from A to B to C. Um, so can you take me back to, like, can you remember, Jonathan at 17, making this list, but also where you were at? Like, how do I get there?
Okay, I didn't make that list when I was 17. When I was 17, I was partying. I was so my
Good for you.
first job I ever had was my brother, my middle brother was manager at a concert hall called the Beverly Theater, and he helped open that theater. And the very first thing that they had there was Beatlemania, and and at that time he needed someone to do the parking, so go and work the parking lot. So I started working the parking lot. Then I ended up going into as an usher, who I actually ushered with some great guys who become very successful as actors in their lives now. One being someone was on Friends, the other was on CSI. So I'm not going to say anything more than that. Um, anyways, I I made myself so accessible that I ended up being head of backstage at the Beverly Theater, and this is right in the beginning of new wave in the '80s. It was all the Brit pop bands were coming out here. Um, and so it was everybody from the Depeche Mode to Simple Minds to UB40, and then some of the bigger acts like James Brown and BB King and Jerry Garcia, and then the rock bands like Rat and Poison and all that stuff. So I got to work with all of them, and I was backstage. So basically, my job was, and I had a single dad with two older brothers and myself. So not a lot of not a lot of I had a lot of time to myself. And so basically I would start at 5 a.m. and work till 2 a.m., especially on weekends. And I would feed the crews, feed lunch, breakfast, lunch. Then I would take care of the show, everybody going backstage to after the after party. So I was at like that almost famous kid where I just got to hang out with all the bands at that time. And I was
So where did you go next from there? How did you, like, did you say, okay,
well,
I've mastered this? And then how do you go the next
Well,
step?
I want to say one thing is when James Brown and BB King played, I was taking care of their lunches and I was taking care of all their catering. Um, I had a big deli platter in with BB King. When I came in just to check to make sure everything was okay, he asked me to have lunch with him. And 17-year-old kid, what do I care? So I go have lunch with him. And the one thing he said to me is that, hey kid, what do you want to do with your life? What do you want to do with your career? I said, well, I'm doing it. I get to go party with the bands, hanging out, music. I'm loving it. He goes, no, really, what do you want to do? He goes, that can't last forever. He goes, kid, the money is in publishing, music publishing. He goes, if I knew back then what I know now, my whole life would have been a lot different. You need to go to college, get an education, go and work in the music industry. The money is in the industry, publishing and so, it was great career advice. And so from there,
Had you thought about that?
that's what made me want to go into the record industry. And
So you really hadn't thought about, you were happy doing what you were
oh, come
doing. And
on,
yeah, I mean,
17 years old, going out to Disneyland with UB40 or working all these great bands in the 80s and going and having fun. I mean, it was a great gig, for a 17-year-old, you
but you
know.
took BB King's advice. Then what
But you
happened?
know what? It really made me think about it, and and someone like who's it's BB King, man. BB King tells you need to go get an education and go work in the music industry. You got to take that seriously. And so yeah, so I went to Cal State Northridge and I immediately got into concert promoting. Took a few years, but I got in and the two projects that the two concerts that I was really excited about was CHIC COREA, who was an amazing jazz artist. If you remember Return Forever with CHIC COREA and Stanley Clark. And
Oh, I love Joe Korea.
the other was this amazing 80s band that I grew up with, who I love is like you too. It's called the band called the Alarm. Rain in Summertime and Rescue Me and 68 Guns and it's just one of the greatest bands. And so I got to learn how to sell tickets and promote them and liaison with them in college, and that's what really kind of made me want to really get more involved in the music industry getting out of college.
So is it a natural progression from it sounds like you went to college was there courses on concert promoting in the business, that side of it,
I
or
was an
was that
extracurricular. I
okay?
started as a business major. I moved into communications,
Got it.
which, by the way, if I have to say any class in college that was most influential for me was public speaking.
Why was
Funny
that?
enough, because I was really shy and when I started school, and this public speaking class just made me break the barriers, and talking in front of people and really putting together a debate and everything else. And I said, if I always tell people that's the most important class you can take.
Yeah,
In-
it's
in-
isn't it the number one fear of everyone, right? To public
Be in front of
speaking in
people, right?
front of people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, we just had your friend who you introduced me to, Roger Love, on last episode, and
One
he
of the
was
best vocal coaches in the world. And
it's
what
incredible.
an amazing career that guy has had.
Yeah.
I love Roger.
Again, there's an example of a guest that on the show that was I probably would never get to if I hadn't been introduced by Jonathan Platt here. So now at this point, so BB King gives you some great advice and says, "Hey, the money's in the music publishing. At this time, you're having fun. You're working backstage at the Beverly Theater, and you want a career in business. You're also really big into baseball and sports, right? So, are you working towards as a concert promoter towards music publishing? Was that still like the goal for
No,
you?
I got into that by accident, to be honest with you. Uh, I graduated college. I had a cousin who had a company that had a film distribution company, and I was an assistant there in doing film distribution, which is another love of my life. I grew up as a kid. I just used to watch every single movie possible, old movies, I was just a TV junkie, you know. Being unsupervised as a kid, that was my supervision, right? I just watched a lot of movies. And so I always had this love for movies. I always had this love for music and movies. Always had this love for music and records. My oldest brother was in a band. So as a kid, I used to just listen to him playing music all day long. My older brother, Mark, who has a radio promotion business and also a radio distribution business called Radio Candy. So I'm just gonna give my plug to my brother. But he was really influential a lot as a kid, wanting to be involved in music and sports. He was also an avid baseball player. So yeah,
Yeah, big plug to Mark. You're probably listening to this show at one point on one of Mark's radio stations. We're
exactly.
on 6 around the world, so we love that. We love Mark Platt. Um,
So
at this point, Jonathan, are you feeling like you're just like a teenage kid? And then you're into college, so you're just following the
I just,
path and you're
you know what, a
finding
lot
your
of it's,
way.
you follow a path and you want to do something, and also it's part of luck. So I had an old friend who I used to, believe it or not, when I was in high school, I used to babysit her daughter. She was a paralegal who worked for the biggest music attorney in the business, Don Passman, who wrote an incredible book, Everything You Want to Know About the Music Business, but We're Afraid to Ask. And she was his paralegal. Her name was Melody Silverman, and she started her own music clearance firm, and she needed an employee. So luckily, I was able to be hired to go and work for her, and she wasn't a mentor at the time. And she really taught me about, she threw me in the fire, which was interesting. She literally threw me in the fire. The first big project we had to do was the Ed Sullivan Show. And she basically said, I work for Don Passman, read his book, and go and clear music for video, TV, and so the client was Andrew Salt. He bought this catalog, the whole Ed Sullivan Show. We had to re-clear 2,000 artists, and so I spent a year learning how everything I can about music publishing, clearances, and licensing, and then clearing Motown, the
What
Beatles,
does
like Stones,
clearing mean? What does
publishing.
that mean?
So all they play when they were on the Ed Sullivan Show, they performed live on the Ed Sullivan Show, and all that music had to get re-cleared for different rights because that was live. So when they bought the TV rights and the home video rights with Disney, all that had to get re-cleared again, relicensed and renegotiated with the publisher and the songwriter, right? So everyone had to be, it was all what we call it on an MFN, most favored nations basis. So we had to pay the same amount to every single one. If you paid $1 more, you got to pay everybody $1 more. So it's a lot of, I was 21, I think at the time, or what, 22. just a lot of freaking pressure to go and do this and make sure you clear it all. 2,000
Yeah,
songs.
in the fire,
And
indeed.
you're dealing with all the publishing, and then you have to deal their AFTRA, which was their TV. They get their TV royalties when they're back on TV. So you have to get all their information and deal with all that and get their approvals. So I spent my first year just kind of dealing with 2,000 artists, basically, on the publishers and then with the artists themselves. And then at that same time, we started working on, we were doing a movie called, we're doing a concert documentary with Madonna called Truth or Dare. And that was the time when she was dating Warren Beatty, and she was just coming off of doing Dick Tracy, and she was huge at the time.
Huge, biggest artist in the world, right?
And
At
this
that time.
documentary was like the craziest thing because there was, you had to go research all this crazy different music and different things, and had to go in and convince people that, like when there was one part where one of the male dancers was walking with flowers, and she wanted to clear the song, "Here She Comes, Miss America," which is the Miss America theme song, pageant theme song. And at the time, she just also came off of doing this Sex book. I don't know if you remember that, Sex. And she was kind of a little controversial at the time, and the pageant didn't want to clear it. And we had to go back and try to convince them to do this and this and that. And we finally were able to get them to come out. She was going to fly them all the way out here to go and listen to the song. And then for whatever reason, they didn't want to do it. And we ended up coming up with the Wedding March, which was the song that actually was used in the actual movie, which was kind of interesting.
How that's totally interesting. So you're 21 at this time. What did you learn from being thrown in the fire, so to speak, on this job and clearing publishing rights and things like that? What did you learn that you've taken?
Army boot camp. It was trial by fire. It's not for the faint of heart. A lot of stress. But I wouldn't. It was like my, doing the Ed Sullivan Show is like freaking. It's like rock and roll 101 for me. I got to learn everything about the music business, the industry, publishing, the bands, the history, which I really appreciate. It was an incredible experience early in my career. Also,
Well,
I got
Jonathan,
to do one other project, which was really cool too, which was from a clearance standpoint was very challenging too. I had to clear for the Sex Pistols' Great Rock and Roll Swindle, and because it was getting bought by DVD was being released by DVD in the States, and we had to go and re-clear everything, and that was quite a challenge as well. And I got to also do the clip clearances for Pee-wee's Playhouse, and it was funny enough, and both of those projects were very important to me later on in my career. But it was like to be able to start my career working on those projects was really amazing. And then being able to circle back and do something with them later on was a lot of fun too.
Because at that time, all of those people that you've mentioned that you worked with and worked on clearing their music and clearing the music for the shows, all of them were pretty hot at that time, right? So that must have been a real exciting time for you, being new in the business or surrounded by.
It was a crazy time, and I learned a lot, and it also made me feel like, what, I can jump into things I don't know and learn it as I go along, and that really became a big and I thank Melody for that, because that really helped guided me through my whole career, because my whole career is kind of done very unorthodox, and I didn't take the path that most people take, where you go work at a major label, or work in the
mailroom,
work all the way up. I kind of did it in a very different entrepreneurial way, and I always tell people I probably am the worst employee for anybody. I'd get fired right away. So I think it was always better for me to always create my own destiny.
Why is that? I mean, explain that. We do have to take a break here, but explain why do you put yourself that way? Because you are just.
My wife thinks I have ADHD. I don't know if I do or not, but I've always been multitasking for life. I don't know if I can just be put in a box doing one thing. I think it's in my nature. I've always been just more that way. I don't think I'd be really good just doing one thing. I like to do many things.
So the lesson, if you're listening, right, is that depending on who you are and what you want to accomplish, don't let any of it hold you back. There are rules, but then there are no rules, right, Jonathan? You're
I think
a
so.
definition of that, a
I
clear
think so.
example.
But I think also at the same time, you have to be respectful. And
Yeah.
at the same time, you have to be, really be to your word if you can. It's a hard industry to do that,
All right, my special guest today, Jonathan Platt. He's general manager at ALIST Media Entertainment Incorporated and the Yoshiki Foundation of America. Jonathan has had multiple successes in his music career. And we're going to talk about that when we come back from this quick break. I want to shout out again to Radio Candy Radio, Radio Candy Media, a lot of great stations around the world. Check it out, radiocandymedia.com. And we'll be back with more of Jonathan Platt. This is a great conversation. Don't go anywhere.